Hey everyone, it's 10 Types. And sorry if my voice sounds bad or the video isn't as good. I'm a little sick today, so that's unfortunate. But I think I'm running a Pokemon tournament. Yay. So yeah, in a few hours of this video being posted, it'll be 2 hours of this video being posted. I'm going to be running a tournament, and there will be a link down below in the no, maybe the description, maybe in the comments, and someone remind me if I forget to put it in the comments. But to a tournament I'm going to be running in Mutant Standard. Um, yeah, on the Pokemon TCG Simulator, and it'll be through that Discord. But anyway, getting that out of the way, I wanted to talk about Pokemon EX. We've seen a year's worth, I guess. I don't know. So Great Tusk, no, Great Tusk and Iron Treads are like they came out this year. I don't know. They're here though. So, I want to talk about them and my thoughts on the EXs, the mechanic, and whether I like it or not, and what I think they'll do with it in the future. Of course, there's the Terra mechanic, and I'll talk about that some. I'll talk about that first. I think the Terra mechanic is. Oh wait, no, in this path is also new. I think it's a decent mechanic. I don't think it's been explored enough. I would have liked to see, for example, obviously Charizard. How are these ordered? I'll just sort them by type, I think. So obviously Charizard DX has been pretty good. That being said, Charizard DX is obviously Dark type. So I would like to see a Charizard DX of a bunch of different types, like the same card. I get why they don't want to do it, and it'll make cards more expensive and potentially cause problems. But I think it could be cool if they have Terra Pokemon, like the same Terra Pokemon, same Terra Pokemon, with the same stats and all that, except just a different type that would kind of more accurately emulate the video game and be cooler, in my opinion, giving players more deck building options and making typing like a more fundamental part of it. Versus right now, as I've said before, I don't think the turn mechanics super greatly used. I think there are other options. We could see an ace spec card that say transforms, or maybe a bunch, 10 different ones, I suppose, or maybe eight that just transform the typing of the Pokemon, changing its weakness, resistance. I don't know. It could do some things, which would be cool, which obviously we haven't seen so far, but that could be interesting with an ace spec to mess with Terra Pokemon. We know they're not very well defined. I don't really remember off the top of my head if there are any Pokemon that reference Terra or cards that reference Terra Pokemon. There might be, but I honestly don't remember because if there is, it's nothing that crazy. But anyway, and then also I want to talk about like the different types of Terra, not actual types, but there are some that are engine ones, and I think we've seen a few, or I guess mostly one. We've seen the yearly like engine basic low HP draw engine and Squawkabilly EX. And then we also saw Mew EX. Mew EX draws some. Mew EX is a really cool card. Mew EX is probably the most interesting card we've seen in like a number of years, in my opinion, because it's really versatile. It can go into a ton of different decks and have different purposes in a ton of different decks, which is something you don't see very often. Because I mean, it has usually a card has like one really big strength, like Charizard DX is really powerful. I mean, it does a few things, but they all kind of go together. UEX does a bunch of different things. It's a free retreat, which is nice. And honestly, we don't have a ton of pivots. It's probably the best pivot. We haven't had a good pivot in quite a while, which is fine, I guess. I think good pivots can be fun. The pivot is Pokemon with free retreat, but you have your attack, which is colorless, three colorless though, so not like super easy to use. I think it could be easier, but it's very fair. It's a versatile attack and sometimes good into different matchups. And then of course you have the ability to draw, but then the lower HP it does have type coverage as well theoretically, but um, that's very matchup specific because of course it's attack. I'll pull it up here. The genome hacking, choose one of your opponent's active Pokemon's attack and uses this attack. That's kind of specific. And next up we have, as I said earlier, Squawkabilly EX. Squawkabilly is very similar to Dene GX. It's obviously, or I don't know if it's very similar. It's pretty similar, except it's only turn one, but you just get to hand draw six. You can only use one as well, but it's pretty cool. I don't love that you can only use a turn one, but you also do have an attack that is semi-usable. I think it's a pretty interesting card, and I like it because I like turbo stuff. I think it's a decent card. We obviously, or it's a pretty good card. We obviously seen it in a lot of decks. Um, let's see, I imagine it's mostly gonna be Roaring Moon. Yeah, we see it with Miraidon. Cloth Electrode, some like very turbo-y basic heavy decks, but that's fine. And you can see it to set up in Inteleon Urshifu and this. Um, There are some different decks, but it can be used to set up. Of course, it does take up a bench slot, and while its attack is usable, it's not great. But anyway, so that's like it for just the engine Pokemon, I think. When I say engine, I mean like draw engine. Yeah, but then we have some other ones with some interesting abilities, and this is something I'm really, really interested in. We of course have disruptive abilities like Spite Offs and Espathra, which is kind of interesting. Um, I don't know if we have any other disruptive abilities. Of course, we have like damage reduction abilities. Um, oh, Ride on the X's have a setup-based ability, but it also has a good attack. And anyway, that's for another day. But then, yeah, there's some like Caparata has damage reduction. Altaria has healing, but like none of them are that good. Wigglytuff's ability is actually very good, and then you have like Mousehold. You have a bunch of interesting but not too crazy abilities. You have really crazy stuff like Fortress EX, kind of bad but kind of funny. Oh, Fortress or no, Frostlass is disruptive as well. So we do see Grass getting a lot of disruptive. Toadschool is as well. Toadschool is one of the only Pokemon on this list that's played exclusively for its ability. That's not a basic. Of course, Gardevoir EX is very good and mostly played in that role as well. Gardevoir EX, I think, is fine. I think it's cool with like the whole Gardevoir line. It's probably one of the most loved in like a normal way, not like a weird way. Um, lines Pokemon ever. It's gotten really good cards, and of course with the Gardevoir and Gallade, you have more options. You see Iron Valiant as well, which isn't really part of it, which I find kind of I don't know. I don't love that the Paradox Pokemon can't be evolutions, but we'll see. Maybe in the future they will. Because they can definitely do some weird stuff from the TCG that's not in the video game. But anyway, Gardevoir is, it's a pretty cool Pokemon. Um, and I wish we had more Pokemon, as I said, with like the Terra types, if they could switch type, but also just a bunch of Pokemon from the same line. For example, Annihilate and Tinkaton both came out in similar ways, and they have multiple Pokemon from that line, which all kind of go together. The Tinkaton, Tinkaton EX and Tinkaton obviously go together, as they both like Tinkaton powers up Tinkaton EX, but there are different cases. Aside from that, I feel like there are a lot. I don't really get the point of the Terra types that don't change type. The like being immune to was it bench damage, I think. Yeah, and you're immune to your own bench damage, but that's just like so not good. As I said, we had some weird cards like Fortress and Alakazam, which is fine. I think the EXs have been fine as well, but they're not really pushing the boundary at all. They're almost identical to. Well, I think it is the same as the old EX mechanic, right? I don't know. I didn't really play back then, but I think it's the same, like the old EX mechanic that was also lowercase. I've heard people say they're the same mechanic, but I don't know if that's really true. Um, but yeah, and then we've seen Outclaw also has a disruptive ability, and Tinglu, I don't know, and Glimmer, I guess the fighting types also have some. Um, but anyway, I think there are some cool cards, but I wish they were a little better. Or I don't know if I'd say better. Somewhere I think the balance is decent, and they're like moderately interesting, but I feel like the mechanic itself isn't super interesting. The GX mechanic was super cool, with the GX attack and the V-Star powers. I think those were both pretty interesting. Nothing like too game breaking, but still important. I mean, GX attack's kind of like ADP's was like really good, but I don't know. I like ADP. ADP wasn't the best for the game, but it was an interesting deck. I need to make a video talking about ADP and Lost Zone. There's some really interesting discussions there. But anyway, um, yeah, I feel like then we obviously have a lot of like not interesting EXs, but even like the not interesting ones are kind of interesting. Like this Great Tusk, not particularly interesting, but you know, I mean, in some sense, it's immortalized to the starter deck, or maybe not immortalized. Hopefully, not immortalized. Hopefully, with rotation, they like change up the decks. But it is pretty generic, but it's still like kind of interesting. Kangaskhan, we haven't seen any like purely boring ones. Anyway, I feel like the cards are cool. Pidgeot EX, of course, is an engine as well. That's like the big engine one. I guess I forgot to mention that earlier. I didn't play in this video before I started talking. So, um, yeah, Pidgeot EX is pretty interesting as well, pretty important, and I feel like it's cool. And I'm happy that we have like a rule box engine that's an evolution. And path will be rotating, which is cool. I guess I'm happy about that. I think it'll be good for the game. Aside from that, oh yeah, and then like Skeledirge, where is it? Charizard, both have multiple like EXs. The one's Terra, the one's not. And then we have the Dark Charizard, and then we have the Metal Skeledirge. There we go. And that's kind of cool. Anyway, I think that the mechanics cool. I wish they, I don't know, that like compared to GX's V Stars, you know, the GX mechanic was obviously like is similar except they had GX attacks. Um, the V Stars came later though, and I think the Future Ancient is kind of cool, but it doesn't really. It's very similar to Battle Styles Ultra Beast. It affects only a small group of cards, and not every set's like focused on it, which in some sense it might be good. So I think we're going to see that same trend of the basic mechanic year one, which is fine, and then we see the Paradox Pokemon year two. Um, and then we'll see something year three, which could be interesting. Will it be three prizes? It might. I honestly don't think three prizes are that bad for the game. I know some people really despise them, but I think they're okay. And they aren't inherently awful either. Um, in terms of like for the game, right? Sometimes they are bad, like the V News were bad. But you know, I'm looking forward to seeing what they'll do with EXs in the future. Um, I think I think they'll continue doing like a few good ones per set. The next set looks super sick, but it's also all basics. I feel like, but we did have a lot of evolution-based decks come out this past like year, notably besides the Paradox Pokemon. The other sets all had like big, really good Stage 2 Pokemon. We had Excalibur, we had Gardevoir EX, and then we had Charizard DX, which were all kind of different. The one was a Stage 2 EX engine, and the one was a Stage 2 non-EX engine, and the one was a Stage 2 attacker, which also often played a Stage 2 engine, but you got some really interesting things. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, consider subscribing. As I said, join the tournament. If that's happening, it probably will be. And I'm excited to see you in the next video.